Thank you for joining us. I'm Paul Wilson.
And I'm Chris Ehmke.
And this is Diesel Performance Podcast. Guys, we got a great show put together today. We got a returning podcast all-star. Jason Wehrli is going to be on with us. Real quick, we want to give a shout-out to our sponsors. They make our show happen. You can support us by supporting them. You can visit DuramaxTuner.com. Yes, there's going to be a huge Black Friday deals going on in November. There's going to be an all-month-long November sale going on, so check in for details. Chris, if they want to get a hold of you to find out more about it, how can they reach you?
Ehmke at DuramaxTuner.com, or they can reach me, dial the main line and extension 2121.
There you go. Exergy Performance. We just had Randy and Jordan on the show here last week, I believe, or the week before. We love working with those guys. Exergy. They provide us all of our high-pressure common rail fuel components that you could think of. The reason we keep working with them is because we always have that top level of quality, the upper echelon of performance. They all use Exergy. You should use Exergy too.
Yeah. And then we have WC Fab. You know, we're very close with the guys and Jason and everybody. One-stop shop, you know, intakes, intercooler pipes, traction bars. You want to custom color code things and, you know, make a real cool show truck out of it. You know, they could be a one-stop shop for that. The one thing that I always want to note, you know, Paul, Exergy and Wehrli are two of those companies, you know, we choose to work with, right?
Yep.
But you could have a competition truck on the weekends that have Exergy WC Fab products, and your tow rig could have Exergy and WC Fab products and have two completely different catalogs right of parts, but you're getting the best premium components possible for your truck, whether it's everyday driver or competition use.
Absolutely correct. And hey, speaking of Wehrli and the crew, like we said, we got Jason Wehrli on the show. Jason, how the hell are you?
Doing good, guys. How are you?
Doing good.
Doing excellent, yeah. Hey, we know this episode is coming out a few hours behind normal, but that's okay. We wanted to hold on till we had a chance to talk with Jason. Recently, he had visited our shop to talk with our team about some different intakes, intake horns, Y bridges, intercooler piping, and just a whole bunch of the products that they have going on. A lot of it, I think, will come back and circle around to at some point, maybe in this episode, maybe in future episodes. But the topic, Jason, that really grabbed my attention was your guys' Y bridges. Now, can you just maybe give us a breakdown for a newer listener? What is a Y bridge? What kind of problems do they have from the factory?
Yeah, sure. So we'll break it down in layman's terms for the listeners that are new to Duramaxes. Y bridge is a term referring to the intake manifold, essentially the intake manifold splitter that takes your single intercooler pipe from the intercooler outlet that splits the intake air between your left and right bank of your V8. You know, it goes in the center of the engine, and one side of the Y bridge goes to the driver's side intake cylinder head, and the other one goes to the passenger side. So it dubbed the name Y bridge over time, over the years, and it's a pretty popular upgrade on all the Duramaxes, being a V8 engine and having a turbo in the valley, two separate intake manifolds. They got to be brought together one way or another because your intercooler is just a single pipe. So starting out in 01 with the LB7, pretty basic Y bridge. We make upgrades. For the LB7. It's a part we've been producing for over 10 years now. The factory Y bridge on the LB7 is about 2¼ inches in diameter on the inside. It's a cast aluminum part. It's got a lot of neck down areas that are detrimental to flow. And we make a nice piece. It's a full 3 inches. The intercooler pipe on the LB7 is 3 inches, and then it necks down to 2¼ at the end to meet the Y bridge, and that's the big bottleneck in the system. So we offer a package that's a full 3-inch intercooler pipe into the 3-inch Y bridge, which opens up that intake track tremendously, helping that engine breathe better and create better throttle response, and quicker turbo spool up.
I love that idea too, right? Of looking at just a factory design flaw where it went from all the way down to 2¼ because when you look at a factory LB7 Y bridge, it looks like a hefty part, right, Chris?
Yeah.
It looks like it's robust. It looks like a hefty part. It doesn't look like something that's going to have a lot of wear and tear. But like you said, once you start looking at the inside of it and looking at how air actually flows through it, there's a big bottleneck there. Have you guys done any flow testing? Is there like a % more that going to 3-inch allows for you guys to flow air through it?
Yeah, so it's pretty consistent. When you're talking 2001 to 2010 model years, the factory parts are all in that 2 to 2.25 inch range. And when you're increasing to the 3-inch version that we make for those trucks, you're typically looking at about a 30 to 40% increase in cross-sectional area. And on the flow bench, when we put the parts on the flow bench, it's pretty consistent backup in CFM numbers as well. So, for example, our LBZ LMM Y-Bridge kit, which is kind of our staple, that's the most popular. Just there's a lot of LBZ LMM trucks out there, and it's a very common upgrade on those model years because the factory design kind of went backwards in quality from the LB7 I just mentioned, because it actually went to a two-piece model where the component is kind of held together by other pieces, and it's just an O-ring seal, and it's not very well supported. And when you add upgraded tuning, turbochargers, you're making higher boost levels, etc., it's not uncommon for those factory Y bridges to come apart there at that joint connection. So we redesigned all that factory setup to use a bolt together style where it's still a two-piece design, so it's easy to install because being two-piece makes it easier to access the lower mounting hardware. There's a lot of one-piece Y bridges on the market, and installing them is a complete nightmare. So the two-piece design is nice for installation, and we just improve the components so that it's an O-ring seal with a bolt-together style flange versus the factory design that's just relies on the O-ring seals really, and they come apart under higher boost levels. But all these components, full 3-inch track, as I mentioned, the LBZ LMM on the flow bench, it goes from the factory part flowing 350 CFM to our part flowing 485. 36% increase over
Holy
factory.
Shit!
And it does, on the dyno, if you were to dyno them back to back, you're not going to necessarily pick up 20 horsepower or 30 horsepower, but you're letting your engine breathe better. You're going to make the same horsepower with less boost. Boost is just a measure of restriction, essentially. And if you can make that intake track flow better and more efficiently, the engine's going to run better. It's going to be more responsive. It's going to spool quicker, and it's overall better in every way, shape, or form. There's literally no negative effect to that aspect. So couple that with performance tuning and an upgraded turbocharger, and it makes for an all-around freer flowing setup that's capable of making more horsepower.
Have you ever done like back-to-back testing? Like where is the restriction in a factory Y bridge? Like, I'm building an 06, Duramax, and I want to shoot for the moon. I want to see, 800 horsepower, right? Is a factory Y bridge really going to be able to get me there? Or where do you start to see like the restriction in the factory Y bridge to where at this power level an aftermarket Y bridge is kind of a necessity?
I mean, you can still make that power. It's just, you're going to be doing it with higher boost levels, and higher boost creates more heat. So if you can make the same power with less boost, you're going to do it with less heat, which is better for performance and better for the engine. And overall, as those horsepower levels increase, the higher flowing Y bridge is only going to be a bigger gain in airflow because you're flowing that much more air. A truck that's making 500 horse, is consuming so many cubic feet of air. Now a truck that's making 1,000 horsepower is consuming twice the amount of cubic feet of air. And if you can flow that air into the engine through a larger pipe, think of it as a straw. Take a coffee straw and try and take a drink of something. And how long does it take you to suck the water out of that drink? Now take a big, huge straw that you drink a slushy with or something. That larger straw, you're going to be able to suck that drink down quicker. You're going to consume that air easier flowing through those larger pipes.
It's such an interesting concept when we get into the charged air system, because my head's right where you're at, Chris, which I think is like the basics of performance, which is what's my next limiting factor.
Of
like,
course.
Where does the Y bridge come up to become a limiting factor? And like Jason, to your point, like it may not be a limiting factor. I don't know that I've seen 1,000 horsepower Duramax build on a factory Y bridge.
No.
I can't remember ever noting that.
I'm sure it's there. Maybe
Right.
we need a listener to tell us.
If you've
right?
done it, please come on the Facebook page and call Chris a liar.
I never said.
but I will.
The biggest restriction there is why you haven't seen the 1,000 horsepower setup with a stock bridge, or if you have, it's typically modified, is because they don't hold together at that type of power level because of the boost levels. That's when they split apart.
I love
we
that.
see stock trucks, just higher mileage, or they've been apart and together multiple times, and those factory bridges just don't seal as well, and it's a boost leak. And you guys know, and you guys preach it as well with tuning and turbochargers, dealing with the Stealth product line and the tuning you sell. boost leaks are literally the worst enemy of any turbocharged engine. It's unregulated. It's a loss of air. It's a major issue in every aspect as far as performance. And when those factory bridges start leaking, I mean, that's the number one issue with the factory design is the leaks.
I agree.
And the gain in airflow is kind of a big positive, just another benefit of the part.
I would say 9 out of 10 guys that we talk to, if it's an 04.5 to 10 truck and their trucks are running poorly and they end up doing a boost leak down test, chances are it's coming out of that two-piece Y bridge right out of the O-ring.
Yeah. And it's funny, too, because that can be one of the harder ones for the guys to kind of track down.
Oh, it's one of the more difficult. Yeah, for sure.
It's not like the easiest spot to get to. I think that's usually one we find with the soapy water, right?
Yep.
It's buried way down there in the engine. It's quite an install to get that factory bridge out of there. But, not even just the bridge, the whole upper section of the factory parts that connects to the bridge, from your throttle valve on an LMM or just the connection to the intercooler pipe on an LBZ through the grid heater, through the connection to the EGR system. That whole upper section is it's two big cast aluminum components, and they've got big dents and divots and all kinds of neck down areas. I mean, there's a section of the factory Y bridge where it's literally only an inch wide, and then it opens up. There's just weird big bottlenecks. And ours, when we designed it, it's a full 3-inch pipe, and it's a full 3 inches the whole way. It's smooth transitions to the flanges. It gets rid of all the kinked areas. And, the biggest thing is it still connects to the EGR system. It still connects to the grid heater and to the throttle valve. It's 100% emissions compliant part. You can bolt it on. If you have a stock truck with no tuning, you can bolt it on. No tuning required, no check engine lights. It's an emissions compliant upgrade. And if you've got tuning, well, then better yet.
No, I think that further allows you to grow in power too, right? Like when you were at the shop a couple weeks back, I kind of made a couple comments. I was like, we're going to talk about Y bridges. Like we know the parts that we sell here at Calibrated, and we've been working with you guys for years. But there's been some new design on some of those parts, and I know you kind of touched on them, but from the old style and design of the Y bridge to the new style and design of the Y bridge, I know you have the provisions for the emissions, which, in the old style wasn't necessarily there. Did that hinder in the flow capabilities or the performance of what that Y bridge is truly capable of, or were you able to retain a lot of that?
No, actually, believe it or not, we spent enough time designing the parts and on the flow bench. Our Y bridge kit that we sell currently for the LBZ LMM, that's emissions compatible, emissions compliant. It actually flows the exact same as the old version that we used to sell years ago. That's no longer available for emissions reasons. So it wasn't even a step backwards. We were able to design the part with all the emissions components intact, and it flows just as good as what we used to sell. Which I mentioned earlier is 36% better flow than the factory components.
That's such a cool factor. This is something that I think we've talked about for a long time on the show, right? Is there's only a few things that really drive innovation in this industry, right? So obviously competitors coming out, emissions regulations coming out, horsepower desire. Those are kind of your three big motivators as a business to redesign something that's been working. Because your guys' old Y bridges back in the day, they worked. Everybody loved them. They were a super popular product, and it was some nice bling down in the bottom of the engine bay. I don't think I ever saw a raw one ever on a truck.
At least not with Wehrli's name on it.
Yeah. So if you were getting a WC Fab Y bridge, 7 years ago, you were going to get it powder coated if you could. And then now you're still doing that same thing, but can you talk a little bit about that design process? It used to just be you and your brothers kind of, welding stuff together in a shop to oversimplify it. What is your guys' design process like now?
Yeah, I mean, when it all started out, obviously we didn't have quite the staff that we have now, and everything was kind of one-off. We get a truck in, we might build a product just for that truck, and then it obviously grew to the point where we were shipping product out and had to, start mass producing stuff, and that's when we built jigs and we're doing stuff on mock-up engines. And then from there, we've made strides in the last 6 or 7 years, with computer software, with engineers, with better equipment, and just a wider range of opportunity with the equipment we have at our hands. And we've redesigned a lot of product. I mean, there's not much I don't think there's anything we still sell that hasn't been redesigned, over the course of the last 6 or 7 years to be improved upon for ease of installation, the manufacturing side of it to make manufacturing go smoother, to help keep the price of the component down or from having to have increases due to material increases. We try and make cuts anywhere else we can in the manufacturing process to make it more efficient. But at the end of the day, to give you a product that fits better, installs nicer, looks better, and we can mass produce, and not have to bring a truck in here to install every single one on and test it on. So having the engineers has been a huge step for us to be able to design this stuff and run it through the machine shop or the laser or even the weld shop with our jigs and our fixtures. Not having to have a full engine at every workbench, and we can have jigs at the bench that we can assemble these components on, and they fit better than some of the factory stuff we deal with.
Well, that fitment's always been the big. I remember 10 years ago, like when I really started to get into this stuff, fitment was a big question when it came to any fabricated parts.
Yeah.
There's several fab shops that I think probably still today that are pretty well known for like, it'll fit if you tap it,
yep.
Right? Yeah.
Well, now your fresh powder coat and all that. Now things are getting scratched. Or I've had in the past where, you just put a dent in it. Put a dent in it and it'll clear, the oil filter, or it'll clear the oil housing of the power steering pump. And it's like, I just spent X amount of money on these pipes, and now you want me to put a dent? You want me to take a hammer to what I just bought for clearance? That's always difficult.
Yeah. No, we don't deal with that anymore. I would say we've got a pretty good reputation for product that fits and looks good and works.
How was that scaling process? What were some of the challenges of going from just doing some of those one-off Y bridges to really getting up to the point now where you have engineers, you have flow benches, and you know what I mean, all of this science and everything that goes behind it?
Oh, it's all come with time. It didn't all happen at once. It was steps here and there. I had a lot of ideas on how to make the parts better. I mean, we used to produce these bridges as a one-piece design just because we didn't have a better way of doing it. And the one piece was better because it was fully welded, but they were absolutely terrible to install. And it was more or less just, you kind of got to deal with it. It doesn't blow apart. It sucks to install, but at least it doesn't leak. And then, we revisited that, and I came up with the idea of our current design, which it's kind of hard to explain, in a podcast here. But if you go to our YouTube channel and look up our LBZ-Y bridges, I go in depth in a video, and I show how our assembly works and what makes it stay together and how it's still an easy part to install. And it's stuff like that that's just evolution over time. The complaints were regular. These things suck to install, and it's just, I know, we know they stink, they suck, but at least they don't blow apart, like I said. But we went back to the drawing board and made it better. That was, 7 or 8 years ago now, and we've been running with that design since, and it's just worked flawless. And the recent update is just to, make sure that all the emissions components are, compatible with it. But it still uses the same core Y bridge that we've been making for many years now that everyone's used to.
So, Jason, you guys have taken your time. It's gone step by step. The development process, like you said, maybe had to be tweaked to meet emission standards or to be able to allocate, the appropriate connections for the emissions. And still you were able to retain that high level of flow. Are there other parts you guys have recently had gone through redesigns maybe to also allow for emission standards?
Yeah, so another big one that we're really excited to bring back out because we've been without it for about a year and a half now is the LML version. The LML over the years, 11 to 16 models, has, it was even more popular than the LBZ there for a while. And for certain reasons, we weren't able to continue manufacturing that part anymore. And in the background, we've been working on a redesigned version that is, emissions compatible, that flows, again, 35%, I think 30 or 35 or 34% better than the factory part. And we're really excited to bring that one to market. It's working through the casting shop right now, and we should have some prototypes going, by the end of the year here. And we're excited about that one because the LMLs, we get questions all the time, daily on that one. Where's the LML bridge? We want an LML bridge. And we redesigned all the intercooler piping, the upper crossover. We got all those parts available. And right now, the factory bridge is the bottleneck on those. Again, they're 2 3/8 of an inch, and we've got a nice little over 3 inches, actually, I believe it is, 3.1 or so. And that one's coming real soon as well. So
I love that. I love coming out with the new stuff. Now, I know one of the things I had heard you talk about recently as well was some of your testing process and what that looks like. I know anytime we're talking about releasing a new product here at Duramax Tuner, testing and data validation such a big topic for us.
Right.
I know it is for you guys too. Can you cue our listeners in? What is, if you got a first prototype in your hands tomorrow, what does the process from there look like to get it out to customers?
Well, even before that first prototype is here in our hands, we do a lot of 3D printing. We've got a pretty high-end 3D printer here, so when the engineers are going through their revisions, they'll get to a pretty good stage in the part where, it's worth printing. We'll print it out, so we got something in our hands we can look at. We'll even install it on the truck at that point, whether it's on a mock-up engine or a complete real truck, to check fitment, check clearances against stuff, make sure the models in the computer are matching to real life, because sometimes there's some variances there between what the computer models show versus, what's real life on the truck. Try and fit it on a couple different model years. And, there's always bound to be a revision or two from that, make an improvement wherever we can, whether it be for fitment or for flow, and go through a couple different 3D printed versions. And then from there is when we spend the big bucks to have the tooling for the casting house made. There's a lot of expense that goes into the design and manufacturing of the tooling in order to get this particular one for the LML is going to be a cast aluminum component, where the LBZ is a hybrid. It's got a cast base section and a fabricated inlet horn. So then from there, once we've got a good design 3D print that we've installed and tested, and we'll have the mechanics install it, we'll get other people's opinions on it versus just myself or the engineer. Usually we'll have the engineer involved in the installation, so that they can see firsthand how things go and make any changes necessary. And then we get the real aluminum part in our hands. We'll get it fixtured up in the CNC machine, get them machined. And then that's when they start going out to some of our close dealers, people we work with. We'll send them to some customers that we have good relationships with for feedback and fitment. And that's about when they're ready to go live.
Man, what a arduous process, right? There's so many steps that go through it. I know sometimes, especially when we were a younger company and we've dealt with other smaller companies, you get that first prototype in, you bolt it up to one truck, you drive it for a weekend and stamp it.
Oh yeah,
it's good to go.
Yeah.
Yep.
But this latest project for the LML, start to finish, is probably going to be a 1.5 year ordeal. So It definitely doesn't always move fast. There's a lot of time in the design. The engineers could have a couple $100 in designing some of these parts, and then all the different versions and edits, and then dealing with the fixture, the tooling for the casting, and then the casting itself, and then setting up our machines to machine it. It's just a big process on top of everyday production and normal everything else happening in the shop. And at any given time, there could be a dozen or 24 different new products, in development, just at different stages.
So, going into LBZ LMM, now the LML, I mean, you guys have had the LB7. Are you guys going to revisit the LLY? I know that's only like a 1.5 year production run, but is that going to be something in your future?
It wasn't as high on the list just because it's a shorter model year run, but they are popular, and we still are getting a lot of requests for those. So it's good to see there's still some interest out there in them, and it's on our list. And we've got a design that's at the 3D print stage, let's say. So it's, a third of the way there, and it's moving forward. It's just not quite as far along as the LML bridge is at this point.
Okay.
Yeah. It's kind of wild. Something else, Chris, I was just thinking of when we started to get hired at a diesel performance company, you likely were a welder, a mechanic, or a sales guy, or a tuner. That was the majority of the jobs. There are some administrative jobs in this industry, but most of the jobs in diesel performance revolved around that. Now, engineers, electronical engineers, there's so much more that goes into it to be able to do this at scale and
industry
be able to
evolved.
do this like this.
Yeah.
It's really, really good to see, and it's always refreshing to talk with you, Jason, about seeing some of these new parts and the new development that's coming out, and kind of all of the blood, sweat, and tears that goes into it to be able to make these things a reality. What's a product that you're excited about that's maybe further out? What's a sneak preview we can give our listeners today?
Well, we'll change pace a little bit here because we're talking Duramax, but believe it or not, we're pretty excited for this Ford. You probably would never expect to hear me say that, but we got a Ford, and we've had it for about 4 or 5 months now, I think. The engineers have been working on some design stuff for a little longer than that. We've got some prototype product that's been on the truck that we've been testing. We've got some pieces that are actually working through the emissions testing process right now for 49 state compliance. And, we're hoping by the end of the year here, we're going to have a couple Ford products for the 6-7 guys, 2020 and newer to start with. And then we'll be working backwards on a couple of the older model year trucks, 17 and 19, and then into the 11 to 16. But the 6-7 Powerstrokes is a big one for us that everyone's pretty excited about. We've had a lot of those. That's probably the number one request our sales guys get, over consistency over the last however many years, is when are we going to see Ford products from you guys? We love your Duramax. We love your Cummins stuff. We want it for the Fords. So we're pretty excited to bring some Ford stuff to market here soon.
Oh, very cool.
That's awesome. That's exciting to hear. Jason, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, no problem, guys. It was good talking to you again, and we'll talk soon.
Absolutely. Listeners, this has been Paul Wilson.
And Chris Ehmke.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for joining us today, guys. This has been Paul Wilson.
And Chris Ehmke.
Make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Come on, Chris. You know me.
Well, that